Hey, it's Dr. Jan. And do you wonder why traditional interventions just are blatantly unsuccessful when it comes to dealing with workplace bullying? Well, I'm here to address that and talk about it from both the perspective of a target and from leaders in HR. And we're really going to focus on one intervention in particular, and that's reporting, because that seems to be everybody's answer to workplace bullying. But in fact, reporting most often increases workplace bullying. It does really nothing to stop it, and it makes it worse. Okay. So let's talk about specifically why traditional interventions just don't work. And why do we keep recommending those over and over and over when we actually know that those traditional interventions increase harm and increase the traumatic effects from workplace bullying for individuals, and it makes the organizational culture significantly worse, almost guaranteeing that bully culture will continue. So let's talk about why. The easiest question first, which is why do we keep recommending them? Because that's what happens in bureaucracies and bureaucratic structures. Is we have these policies and procedures for reporting, for resolving issues, and we just go back to those. Okay, we just keep going back to those because that's what we have. That's what policy says. That's what the procedures are. And 9 times out of 10, organizations have zero policies and procedures when it comes to workplace bullying. So they use one they think fits, and that's conflict resolution. And conflict resolution generally has go talk to the person and see if you can resolve it. And then you move up the chain of command in reporting those issues. Okay. So again, talking to the bully makes it worse. Reporting to HR, to your supervisor, any type of reporting makes workplace bullying worse. But because it's kind of our standard and traditional intervention, it's a go to because it feels good. We think it should work, and it's very problematic. So, the first question is why do we keep going back to those interventions that don't work? And the answer to that is very simple. It's because those are the interventions that most bureaucracies have in place. And when it comes to conflict, those often are very effective. But when it comes to workplace bullying, because it's not conflict and it's significantly more complex, when we utilize those things, it makes it worse. But we use them because that's really all we know. And experts, okay, a majority of workplace bullying experts will tell you, if you look on their web pages or you do any sort of research, that reporting and talking to the bully, reporting to your supervisor, reporting to HR, that's a go-to. I recently just did, out of my own curiosity, and I had a little free time, if you can imagine that, I did some research on what were some of the different professions and bigger organizations and associations, what were they recommending? So I looked at human resources, I looked at nursing, and some other ones I can't recall right now. But their go-to is reporting. Okay. And so even though, again, it doesn't work, many people are still recommending it because that's their fallback and that's what they're comfortable with. And again, it should work if it wasn't workplace bullying. Okay. So it doesn't work because workplace bullying is more complex. Reporting and talking to the person you're having an issue with conflict generally works. Now, not always, of course, but it works because conflict is just usually between a couple of people. Okay. Whereas workplace bullying infects the entire organizational culture. It gets into the norms and values, right? It actually changes the norms and values of your organization from one of good professional behavior where we treat people with respect and dignity to one where bullying and mistreating and abusing people becomes the norm. So that's a much different and significant problem. Okay. And because we view, again, a lot of people still view workplace bullying as it's an issue between me and the bully. Okay. Which is so outrageously problematic because it's so much more complex than that, is though they think those individual interventions work. Okay, so workplace bullying is more than just an individual issue between me and a bully. It is an organizational issue, which means it changes the values and behaviors and expectations from professional to bullying. And the other thing it does, it infects group dynamics. Okay, and people end up believing the narrative about the target because of my side bias, and they seek out information that confirms that they believe the target is the problem. Okay, and people are scared. People, bystanders, build relationships with bullies to get ahead in their careers, and so they're making decisions about whether they should support the target or support the bully, and they're always looking at it from an individual perspective. What is best for me? Okay, and so for many bystanders, even though they know bullying is happening, they go along to get along because that's what's moving their career ahead. Okay, and many also believe that the target is in fact the problem, so they end up believing these kind of lies and stuff that the bully is telling about the target. So it's much more complex because everybody frankly is invested in that dysfunction happening. Okay, so if you look at it merely from a bystander perspective, okay, let's look at it from that. If I am getting ahead and getting things that I want because I'm showing loyalty to the bully, I'm engaging in some of the bullying, I'm covering for the bully, okay, why would I change that if I can get ahead by doing so? There has to be a payoff for bystanders to want to stop the bullying that's better than what they're getting for that dysfunctional setting that they're working in. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So bystanders almost always are being rewarded for engaging in the bullying, keeping their mouth shut, lying about what's happening because they're getting rewards from that organizational culture. So the reward for not engaging in that has to be more than what they're getting. Okay, and 9 times out of 10, we're not even looking at bystanders as being part of the problem. Okay, but they're helping sustain bully culture by inaction and keeping their mouth shut. Okay, so it infects the norms and standards. It infects the group dynamics. Okay, and the other problem is this: is that many times people who are making decisions about what's happening in the workplace, right? So if you're HR or you're a leader and I'm reporting to you that the bullying is happening, okay, many times you also have a bias about the target because that bully has been feeding you lines of stuff. They've been giving you information that confirms what they're saying. And so many times when the target goes into report, the leader or HR or whoever they're reporting to already has a view of who's the problem, and it's not the target. Okay. And that's because, again, here's another problem with reporting for targets is one of the misconceptions that targets have when they go into report is that this is the first time that that person is hearing about it. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because while the targets are out there working and trying to manage workplace bullying, the bully is out there cultivating relationships with people in powerful positions to get people to believe them. Okay. And so many of the bullies that I've known in my life spent a lot of time in HR. Many of them even bullied HR, and HR was scared of them and didn't want to get on their bad side. And so they didn't want to intervene because they too were being bullied, and they just didn't want to rock the boat or make it worse. And they were making calculated decisions that if they didn't intervene in this bully culture and help the target, that maybe somehow that would alleviate the bullying they were experiencing. Okay. And the other thing that happens with leaders and HR is that they develop a bias about the target because they've already been fed a bunch of misinformation that, again, when this is just human nature. Okay. When you're told something over and over and over and over about a person, it's very difficult to not consciously end up believing that. Okay, you have to make a conscious effort to remain objective and to find facts that confirm and disconfirm what you're being told. Now, because we don't want to do that, we take what someone is telling us, and when they've been telling it to us over and over and over and over again, we have a tendency to believe it. Okay, that's just human nature. Okay, and so when targets go to report, it isn't the first time that human resources or leaders have heard about them. Okay. But there's a misconception when you're going to report that somehow this is the first time you're telling HR or your supervisor about what's happening. Okay. That's just not true. Okay. And so, how targets report and how leaders in HR look at reports is a huge problem. Okay, because if you go back and look at what workplace bullying is, and I'll link that video for you so you can understand what really workplace bullying is. Okay, it is more than just a set of behaviors. Okay, but when we're looking at the definition of workplace bullying, it does include all of these types of behaviors, eye rolls and shoulder shrugs, what we consider, petty, right? And big deal, right? So if I went in and said, well, bully A was eye rolling at the meeting with me, okay, nobody's going to take that seriously. Okay. And generally what happens is people only look at the last incident. Like, even if it was a major incident, right? Even if it was a bigger incident, they're only looking at the last event. Okay. The last incident of abuse. Well, that's not workplace bullying. Workplace bullying is an entire portrait of bad behaviors directed at one or two people in the work environment. Okay. And so and I did this and I was guilty of it. I would continually report one behavior, one incident. And HR never looked at my documentation, not once. Okay. Not once. Okay. And that was their fault, not mine. They should have looked at my documentation. But I should have not continued to report one incident. I should have reported all of the incidences and painted a picture for them of what was happening. Okay. But we're not, our reporting systems are not designed to report a bunch of incidences, right? So targets have to present that material and that documentation and their artifacts in a way that's easily digested and understood, for HR and leadership. And so leaders in that same vein have to understand that, one, you better be looking at that documentation and you better be objective and scrutinizing it. Okay. And you better be checking yourself for what bias you have about the target, because I promise you, 9 times out of 10, you already think the person sitting across from you is the problem. And if you're doing that, that's a problem. Okay. I understand that, yes, you might have bias against somebody, but if somebody is coming to report to you and say that there's workplace bullying, you ought to have some red flags going up about yourself and why you might believe what you're believing, and whether or not you're being drawn into something that's totally different than what you think it is. So you better be self-reflecting on yourself, okay? And really, really do a deep dive and an honest self-reflection as to why you might have bias against that person sitting across from you. And if you do, then you aren't doing yourself or your organization any favors if you ignore it, okay? Or if you penalize and re-traumatize that person by not doing anything. If you think you have a bias against somebody, you have a responsibility to find someone else who can look at what's happening, right? Okay? Because what ends up happening is, first off, you're probably thinking this if you're in leadership or HR, you're like, why can't these people resolve these problems themselves? Okay, I'm here to tell you that because it's workplace bullying, and it's not a problem that one person can solve. Because if a target could solve workplace bullying and stop it, they wouldn't be knocking on your door. Okay, because they have already tried to solve it, they can't. Okay, I have never known a target yet to this day who has not done a whole lot of things to try to resolve bullying before they reach out for help. Okay, and that's because there's a lot of shame, and they blame themselves, and they wonder what's wrong with them, and there's a lot of internal conflict, and it takes a lot of courage for somebody to come to you and say, hey, I think I'm being bullied. Okay, and what you're if you're HR or in leadership, okay, what you have to do is, I'm going to give you three things that I highly recommend. First off, when somebody comes to your door, take it seriously. And what I mean by that is that if somebody is saying that there's workplace bullying, in and of itself, you got something wrong in your organizational culture. Okay, because those things don't generally just pop up. If you have a healthy, resilient workplace, you got a problem. Okay, and so you really need to think strategically about what you're going to do. Second, you better know what workplace bullying is. And if you think it's just a set of behaviors between two people, that isn't what it is. You need to figure out and understand the complexity of the group dynamics, okay, how your organizational culture is sick and infected, okay? And until you systematically intervene, bullying is just going to keep happening, even if you get rid of somebody. The goal, of course, is to get rid of workplace bullying. Okay. So if you have allegations of workplace bullying and you want to follow your bureaucratic policy and procedure, I 100% get there. And I get that. And sometimes targets have to follow bureaucratic process. Okay. But if you're a target of workplace bullying and you want to report workplace bullying, there's a way to do it. I've touched on this before. And one of the things in the next week or so, I'm going to talk you through the whole process of how you go from I want to report to making that report, because you have a lot of things to think about, and how you report to HR is really, really important. But if you're HR and you're in a leadership position and you don't have a policy for workplace bullying, that's a problem, because what your standard is going to be is to use conflict resolution. Okay. And that's going to make everything worse. And your job doesn't need to become more complicated. I know HR people and leaders, you're already busy. Okay. And your goal is to stop workplace bullying. And you want to be able to implement policies and procedures, or even if you don't have policies and procedures, interventions that you can utilize that will decrease the tension in the workplace, increase professional behavior, and eventually weed out bully culture from the organizational culture. And that takes some time. So, what do? The first thing you need to do is take a couple of deep breaths, right? Okay. This isn't a problem that started yesterday and you're going to fix tomorrow. This is a problem that's been cultivating and festering for months, years, and in some cases I know have been there for decades. So you're not going to get rid of it quickly. And the best thing that you can do is to, again, take that deep breath. You're going to be, if you're dealing with bully culture and you're in leadership and you're in HR, you need some deep breaths, more than some deep breaths, right? You need to realize that you're going to have to figure out a strategic plan to systematically intervene on both the individual level, on the group level, and on the organizational level. And you need a strategic plan and interventions on all those levels. And I would highly recommend that reporting is not mandatory, unless, of course, you want that to be in somehow you think that's going to work for you. Okay. Because what I'm going to also do for you, HR and leaders, is I'm going to teach you what you should be asking people to document. And I'm going to be telling you that it's not just targets you should be documenting. You should be getting bystanders involved in that as well, to help with a collective mentality in your workplace, and how you should be looking at artifacts and documents is going to be a process for you. And so Traditional interventions don't work because workplace bullying has infected the organizational culture. It's not just about Jan and the bully, it's about everyone in the organization. Everyone is involved. Everyone, frankly, to be honest with you, is invested in having that succeed, bullying succeed, because the majority of people in your work environment are getting something out of it. Okay. And so getting rid of those rewards from bully culture is also going to be difficult, but not impossible. And I think you're going to be surprised at how little it takes to start weeding some of that out. But traditional interventions, like reporting, what that does for the bully is it threatens them. They have gotten a lot by investing in their bullying. And it's like when they are being reported, it's like you're pulling the rug out from underneath them. And they're not going to have it because, frankly, bullies are socialized into those roles and they are like hamsters on wheels. Okay. And when a report is being made, they feel like somebody's trying to take them out of the wheel of power. Okay. And that is, they're just not having that. And that's why then retaliation increases. So when reports are made, bullying increases. It often goes underground. It becomes more subtle. It becomes more covert. Nobody, maybe there were witnesses in meetings before. Then the bully decides, oh, I'm just going to get that person when they're walking in the hallway, or I'm going to go into their office. So it becomes more covert. It becomes less difficult for you to figure out. But what it does is it hurts the organizational culture because it reinforces that culture of fear and it traumatizes the target. And we just can't have either one of those things. And that's why, again, traditional interventions like reporting just don't work, because workplace bullying is so much more than an individual problem.